Purchasing a lens is costly depends entirely on one thing, whether you are looking at it as an expense or whether you're looking at it as a potential investment. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing this behemoth and talking about who should be buying this lens and why. Let's get into it. So good to be seen, and it's even better to see what's going on. I hope you're doing well and staying safe. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that I've been away these past few weeks shooting my very first wedding and 2 private events, during which time I was able to put this lens through its paces. The pictures you're about to see sprinkled into this video were all taken with my new Canon RF 24-70 f2.8 ISL USM lens, and yeah, that's a mouthful. Chances are that if you're stumbling across this video, you're still on the fence about whether or not you should pull the trigger and get it. So I'm going to do my absolute best to help you to make a final decision. I encourage you to watch until the very end so that you're immersed in all of the talking points I'm going to bring to the table. Let's kick things off with the reason why I personally invested in this lens myself, in hopes that you can relate to them as well. I want us to start monetizing my photography in 2022, and although street photography is sort of my jam and forever will be my jam, I wanted to venture outside of my comfort zone and be hired privately for corporate events and weddings, and I needed a solid workhorse to get me started. I used to own the EF version of this lens and regretted selling it immediately because I lost a powerhouse. I did, however, have to do it since I wanted to go ahead and migrate to the RF mount and ditch adapters altogether. A good 24-70 is a staple in every photographer's bag and probably the best starting point if you're going to fork over a few bucks towards reinventing your kit. The other options, of course, are the wide angle and telephoto, which, as you know, comprises the famous trinity of zoom lenses, something that's in the pipeline for myself, as well as many of you watching out there. Now that that's out of the way, let's dive right into what makes this lens an absolute beast, and that's going to be the build quality. At first glance, you're going to notice that it's rather plasticky compared to its EF counterpart, and there's a good reason for that. Canon wanted to go a little bit more minimal on its design, but do not let that fool you. Once you get this in your hand, it comes in at slightly over 2 pounds. Definitely has some heft to it, but nothing that you can't handle. The lens feels great in the hands. I find it to be quite ergonomic and feels even better attached to my R6. As far as the rings are concerned, as with most RF lenses, the outer is the control ring, which I have set to control the ISO, but I'm now thinking of changing it to white balance because I have the thumb dial controlling that as well. The other two control my aperture and my shutter speed. The control ring does click right out of the box, but I think that you can ship it to Canon and they can actually get it declicked for a price. I personally don't think I will because I kind of like the clicking sounds. The manual ring is by far the smoothest I've ever felt in the hand, but it's a shame because I know for a fact I won't be using it as much as the average Joe. I don't shoot manual all that much if I'm being honest. The zoom ring, on the other hand, is one I found myself using all night at a private art gallery this week, and it came in very handy. It's definitely not as smooth as the focusing ring, but that's by design. You definitely don't want to be over zooming or under zooming your composition and need something that's going to be just a little bit more raspy. I'll tell you what I do love about it though, however, and that's the throw on it, which can go from 24 to 70 in just a 90-degree turn, literally. The other 2 great elements this lens has is stabilization and weather sealing. As you might recall, the EF version of this lens was not stabilized, and this new RF version has been given 5 stops of shade correction within the lens, which is very helpful in low shutter speeds. Weather sealing has never been an issue for me personally because it's almost sunny here in Puerto Rico almost all the time. But if you're someone who lives in areas where heavy rain and snow are prevalent, then that's a feature you'll enjoy having in this lens. It's also worth mentioning that the lens itself does come with a hood, unlike the non-L glass that Canon makes. As expected, the lens has both AF and MF switch, as well as the on and off button for stabilization. Not that you'd ever want that off, I don't think. And lastly, the locking mechanism, which you can apply only when the lens is fully retracted at 24 mil. The front element is comprised of 9 aperture blades, which makes for nice circular bokeh. And yes, that's actually how you pronounce it, bokeh. It's Japanese. and the thread mount is 82 mil. Minimum focusing distance at 24 mil is 0.69 feet and 1.25 feet at the 70 millimeter telephoto end. The next thing you should be informed of is the autofocusing capabilities. Fun fact, during my most recent event, I strapped on a Black Rabbit double harness with this lens on my R6 on one side and the 85 f2 on the other, attached to my B cam, which, as you know, is the EOS R. The difference was night and day between these two lenses. Granted, that's not saying much considering their worth, but it was incredible to see just how snappy the autofocusing on this lens was. I definitely found myself gravitating to the 24 to 70 most of the night, and because of focusing alone, I think that I shot, I want to say 75% of my pictures on this lens because the AF on it was a must for me, since many of my shots were candids that I just couldn't afford to miss. If you're a professional photographer depending on reliable AF technology, then I'll have you know this lens will never disappoint you. The next topic of conversation is, of course, the image quality. If this past week was any indication of what kind of image quality I can get out of this lens, then my mind is blown. I'm going to share with you some of my favorite images from my most recent event so that you can get a feel for what you actually can expect out of this lens. I must say the sharpness at 2.8 was amazing, and that only got better as I stopped down when I needed to. The colors rendered incredibly, and it was an absolute dream to edit in post. I did a lot of product photography while shooting a private event for a rum factory, and the crisp detail blew me away. Also took it to my favorite spot, Old San Juan, for some street photography and was able to take absolute bangers with this thing. Finally, candids of people in an event I shot, as well as some of their multiple guests, were a breeze and absolute pleasure to my eyes, which begs the question, should you drop the cash to get this lens? Well, that's entirely up to you. I'm going to level with you. There are two types of people considering this lens: those who see it as an expense and the ones that view it as a potential return on an investment. Let's face facts here. At $2.3 thousand, this lens isn't exactly cheap, and therefore you have to ask yourself if your photography has reached a serious enough level which justifies dropping more than $2,000 on a single lens. You see, I wanted to level up this year and convert my side hustle to my main business, and although it's still a work in progress, I wanted to put myself in a position to succeed, and I wholeheartedly believe that this lens allows me to do that. It's versatile enough that I can take landscapes, street, events, weddings, engagement sessions, portraits, food, product, and even architecture if you play your cards right. What I'm trying to say is that although expensive, this lens is definitely worth its asking price, and if you're anything like me, wanting to scale up this year, you should see it as a no-brainer. In case I've incentivized you to pick one up, I've hooked you up with the link in the description so that you can check it out for yourself. This video has been value to you. Stick that thumb you know where, and if we're now meeting for the first time, I'd like to hang out again. My name is Francis. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you guys in the next one.